Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second annual Women in Business Trailblazer series. We're delighted to see so many of you here tonight, students, faculty, and friends, gathered for what promises to be an inspiring and thought-provoking conversation.
Tonight we have the honor of welcoming a true pioneer in global journalism, Roula Khalaf, editor of the Financial Times. Roula is not only the first woman to lead the Financial Times in its 131-year history, but she's also a trailblazer whose career has spanned continents and crises, from reporting on the Arab Spring to overseeing a network of over 100 foreign correspondents. Roula's journey began in Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War and took her from New York, where she started as a staff writer at Forbes, to London, where she has shaped the FT's coverage of some of the most significant events of our time. Her leadership and editorial vision have earned her numerous accolades, including the Peace Through Media Award and the Foreign Press Association's Feature Story of the Year.
Beyond the headlines and awards, Roula's story is one of integrity and breaking barriers. She has spoken candidly about the challenges women face in leadership, about finding your voice, balancing work and family, and redefining what it means to lead in a changing world. Her example encourages all to persist, to be bold, and support each other as we navigate our own paths in business and beyond. Roula's commitment to fearless reporting, her insights into global affairs, and her advocacy for diversity in newsrooms resonate deeply with our club's values.
So without further ado, please join us in welcoming Roula Khalaf to the stage. We look forward to an engaging fireside chat and to hearing your questions later in the evening.
Hi, Roula. Thank you very much for coming to join us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
So one of the questions we touched on in the hallway just now, I thought was interesting because I was obviously very excited that you were coming here. And then I saw that you, for example, were in California interviewing Sam Altman in his home. And then, another week you're at Davos, you're incredibly kind of like busy and in demand. So how do you manage your time? Like what was it that stood out for you tonight about coming to LBS?
Well, hi, everyone. First of all, can you hear me? Yeah, great. Do you all read the FT? Yeah, good. Okay, I may have questions for you then a bit later on. Well, I have a job that can be sort of, you have to divide it in three different sort of baskets. That's the way I think about it. On one, and probably the most important, is the editing, the daily work. It's, taking conferences every morning, making judgments on stories, picking stories, what needs, more editing or what needs more sourcing, for example. The second is being a bit of a reporter myself. I mean, there are always two types of editors: the sort of editors who really still love reporting and are still out there interviewing people and trying to still write, and those who don't, who just take. And there is a bit of a difference between, I think in the UK, editors tend to be more visible and more active, and in the US they tend not to. And then the third basket is more as a board member of the organization, where I am in discussions and in debates about the future of the FT, the strategy of the FT. AI has been a big topic for us over the past year, and we can get into that if you want. So you can guess what the best part of my job is, and that is the ability to still, to meet some very special people. I mean, like him or hate him, there aren't two people who are like Sam Altman today. It's an experience meeting him. It's also very interesting for me. And I mean, I think for anyone who's using ChatGPT on a daily basis, to just get sort of inside the mind of people who are creating these products and where they think they're going with it. One of the things, I mean, over the past year, I've also interviewed Demis Hasseb, who's probably someone that you know pretty well. I always have the same question, which is, you know, on the one hand, incredibly impressive, you know, incredibly creative, but on the other hand, they are living in their own world, and they are creating products that they see as part of a very optimistic future. And part of that future is indeed optimistic. But another part of it is more worrying. And, you know, I think a lot about the existential questions that we face today with AI. And so I'm always curious to ask and, you know, to have a conversation about them.
And so that's quite interesting in the sense that when you kind of took on this role of being editor of the Financial Times, you were the first woman to hold this position. It's a 135-year history. And so what do you feel has been the lens that you have wanted to bring to bring out different stories or to kind of evolve the newspaper while staying true to, I guess, traditional values of what people have grown to love the FT for?
So I ticked two boxes, actually, because I was the first woman, but I was also the first editor with, you know, an accent. So I have a British citizenship, but I was born in Lebanon. I grew up in Lebanon. So it wasn't the most obvious choice, I think, for editor. I think that the job of editor doesn't change whether you're a man or a woman. The difference is more in style, sometimes in nuance and emphasis. But the job is the same. You know, my job is to produce the best newspaper, whether digitally or in print, on day in and day out. I've always had a view that may have been, you know, more expansive of what an FT story is. We tended, I'll give you an example. There's a huge, you know, I don't know, conflict somewhere. And sometimes the FT would look at the stock market and have the front page splash with a headline, you know, stock market collapses as war breaks out somewhere. And I've always said the story is the war. And we mustn't always try very hard to insist on the FT angle. Yes, maybe the second day will look more, or the third day will look more at the economy, and others will not, or at business reaction. But when there's a war, there's just a war. That is the story. And this is why I talk about, you know, nuances. I also remember that when I was covering the Iraq War, and I wanted to do a story about children, and I remember being told, "No, we don't do children." Like, but it's really important that there is a reason why we do need to do children. The impact on children was much greater than the impact on any other segment of society. And so that tells us something. You know, we don't, you know, we're not the Guardian, we're not the Times. So there are a lot of topics that we don't write about. But I think the topics that we do write about we have an opportunity to just have a slightly wider lens and think of the interests of business and our readers in a slightly broader way. Our focus, and particularly in a digital world, our focus is always on the reader. You know, in the old days, we didn't know our readers. We just produced a newspaper, sent it out, and we didn't have any real data on our readers. Today, we have data every single second on our readers, who's reading, what they're reading, where they're reading, even how much they're reading. And so we are guided by what we see. We are guided by the data, but we still exercise our judgment as editors, as journalists, as to what we think you, an FT reader, should also be exposed to.
I find that quite interesting in terms of everything that you're saying, but in terms of kind of this digital readership, because what I think is really phenomenal is the success, like enormous success of the FT. So I believe that you just passed £500 million in revenue.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is amazing. And then also you're one of the only readerships to actually have increased the number of subscribers. Whereas I was doing some background research and saw that some newspapers, for example, have seen up to like a 33% drop in their readership. And so what do you feel has been really the keys to the success in terms of evolving the FT for the modern day and actually achieving what is really incredible results?
I think one of the most, well, first of all, the FT is amazing. I mean, who would not read the FT? So, but we started our digital transition early. A lot of news organizations have had a lot of trouble moving to digital. Because what's happened in our industry is that advertising revenue went down, and those who've succeeded have replaced a lot of the advertising revenue with subscription revenue, which is a much more stable stream of revenue. You can see into the future. We have data on how we can articulate how many of our readers or of our subscribers will remain with us. There are a type of subscriber who will subscribe for 3 years, so we call it, the lifetime, the lifetime of a subscription. So a lot of newspapers started their digital transition late. We started very early. We were we were the pioneer, really, of the subscription model. And we have a group at the FT and FT Strategies that help others. They advise on how you move to a subscription business. And I think that is, if I were to pick one element that has helped us, it is that we were early. Timing is everything when there's huge disruption, and we saw the disruption and we were able to get ahead of it. We are now facing a second wave of disruption with AI, and that's why I and the CEO have been very keen to be experimenting with AI early on. So last year we developed Ask FT. So instead of our search function, which was never a very good search function, we now have Ask FT, which is essentially generative search. So you can ask FT, and you just put in the search bar, what has the FT written about this topic or this person? It's only FT material from our archives. And, we're experimenting with putting some tools in the hands of readers as well. And we have started to use AI in the discovery of stories. And that is one of the areas that I'm most excited about, because AI can help you, as I'm sure you all know, mine very unstructured data sets. And so we set up alerts for journalists from various, data sets that used to take them, weeks, if not months to sift through. So some of the stories that we've done recently on the Trump coins, we were able to do them through AI, through our work on AI. So in disruption, you have to get ahead, and you have to be prepared to take some risk as well, because you can never be sure that the choices that you make will be the right choices. It's worked for us, and I think it's put us in a very strong position in the market. We also never. I mean, I think there's another point. We're an expensive subscription, and we have stuck to that. We did not go for volume. If we lower our price massively, we'll have much bigger subscription base. But we decided that is not the road to profitability. We have got to remain profitable. This is what decides on the durability of our business. And so we have maintained the expensive subscription, but we have also developed one separate, cheaper subscription that you can get 8 stories a day for, I think, £5 a month. So far, it's worked. It's worked really well. And again, I mean, I will go back to, the essence of everything is, the quality journalism that we produce. You have to have a great product to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was looking at I know that the subscription is quite expensive, which is why I was quite pleased when I arrived at LBS that they provide it for free for 2 years. Which I
just make sure you keep it after you leave. I mean, actually, no, honestly, I mean, you do have to think that. I mean, you should let us know. Maybe I can, I don't know. Maybe there's a deal we can make for you to keep your subscription.
I know that there are some LBS faculty that might be keen to talk to you about it afterwards. Definitely quality journalism, I mean, is something that I'm consistently really impressed with the FT. And I mean, when I've seen some of your interviews, and even, for example, some of the articles coming out, it's very, I'm so impressed at how bold some of the questions are. Or, for example, I can't remember the title. I remember the weekly kind of email dropped in from you at the weekend, kind of saying that you weren't impressed about one of Trump's recent policies.
The big beautiful bill.
Yes, that's the one. Yes, exactly.
I think we did a leader, an editorial that said it's big but far from beautiful.
Yeah, and I just think that in a time when censorship and control of media is massively increasing, we're entering this very tumultuous world geopolitically. I think that I have so much respect for a newspaper and for individuals that are willing to be bold, to ask these really hard questions. And so where does that courage come from? And what do you draw on that kind of allows you to kind of have that fortitude to be able to take that stance or ask those questions?
Well, I mean, it is especially in times like this where you have to be clear. You have to be bold because the risks are much greater. We differentiate between news and opinion. And in news, I insist that we are, very straight. We don't editorialize. We analyze, but we don't editorialize. But even when I say analyze, that means that if you report something that is demonstrably a lie, you have to also say it. I'll give you an example. When President Trump met with Cyril Ramaphosa last week, and he talked about white genocide, it's very, very important that we actually in the story say, there is no evidence of white genocide in South Africa, because otherwise we would be normalizing lies. And so it is in moments like these that you need to have real clarity of purpose, but also not think that because you need to be balanced, then you can let lies slide. That would not be a service that you're providing to the reader. And then on the opinion page, I do not interfere in what columnists write. Columnists will write, Martin Wolf has been writing very, very tough pieces. I never tell a columnist what to write. That's the rule at the FT. They can write whatever they want to write. They are opinion writers. That is their job. Their job is to have opinions and to express their opinions. And we have our editorial, our daily editorial, where we do express our opinions, and they are often very strong opinions. I've covered authoritarian regimes for much of my career, and there is it's not so much a rule as to how you cover authoritarian regime, but I think a lot of people are very uneasy, uncomfortable. How do you cover someone who's either lying or exaggerating all the time, or actions that are detrimental to a country or to society? I'm very clear about how you cover them. I think you tell the truth. That's our job. Our job is to tell the truth, and I hope that we are doing it, without fear, without favor.
And do you have, on that kind of topic, do you have any practical advice for people in this room about, integrity, or when to kind of like stick to the truth, or in these kind of tumultuous times?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to be certain of your facts. I think that as long as your facts, double check yourself, fact check yourself. I think as long as the facts are right, you can then analyze the facts and opine on the facts. Where I think you go wrong, and I think we could go wrong, and I warn against this all the time, is if we write stories that are where we get our facts wrong. I think this is what really weakens us, especially vis-a-vis governments who may be essentially waiting around the corner for you to make a mistake. That's why I always think if we do make a mistake, and everybody makes mistakes, we got to correct it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's really a mistake, then we have to correct it.
Yeah. And so when you're pulling in these facts and you're curating kind of information coming in, like all these stories coming in from the world, you've spoken a little bit about utilizing AI in order to curate stories, to bring in information, which I think is fascinating. I also think that it just must be incredibly complex, as in what stories do you prioritize? Which regions do you manage? How do you manage the different sources? So can you describe a little bit about that to us?
Yeah, I'll tell you about my life every day. There is, currently there is an attempt by President Trump to flood the zone. So there's a lot of Trump news coming in, and the readers want it. There's no question that the readers have not tired of it. But what is special about the FT is that we're a global newspaper that covers the world and that is able to connect the dots between different events around the world. So the Trump story itself lends itself to what we are where our strengths lie, because it is connecting U.S. policy to, whether you're writing about U.S.-China trade, whether you're writing about, foreign students being, having visa restrictions. These are global stories for us. But there is one thing that, I am concerned about, and I do talk about in morning conference, and that is that we can't also ignore everything else that's going on in the world. So in the choice of stories, I will often say, well, have you seen the story from, South Africa? And maybe we should bring it up on the homepage. It may not do as well as a Trump story, but I think we have an obligation also to our readers to be telling a broader world, a broader global story. So today, for example, we had a story on Saudi Arabia and AI that was very high on the homepage. We had China manufacturing. So the curation of the homepage it's something that's constant, that the team is doing all day, and you need a certain balance. It's quite, it's not the easiest thing to do. You need a balance between, sometimes you may just have a lot of geopolitical stories, and I will say that's too much geopolitics at the top of the homepage. The great thing is that we have the content. I mean, on a daily basis, we are producing terrific content, and so it's just a question of how do you prioritize, as you say.
Yeah, definitely. Well, because I guess it then feeds into your brand, like managing your brand. Like if you just become kind of like a mouthpiece for, say, the Trump government, then, for say like the US geopolitics, then actually you're not being true to like your reader base who are global in nature.
Luckily, he kind of really kicks off around 4 p.m. US time. So I think our US homepages have a lot more Trump than the UK homepage or the European homepage.
Yeah, definitely.
He keeps going until midnight.
So we touched a little bit on artificial intelligence, and I'm just wondering, we have in this room lots of aspiring leaders and very ambitious students, of which I think majority are female in here, but also I don't want to exclude the men here. One of the facts that kind of it seems to be repeated a lot is that we're 135 years away from gender parity. 135 seems like a very specific number. So
I think I've cited it, but I can't remember where it's from.
Anyway, it just comes across as a very specific number. But I mean, what do you see in terms of kind of, I guess, trends that are trends coming in, say, in the future, let's say, near term, 10 years, longer term, 20, 30 years, that we should all be thinking about?
Do you mean on gender parity?
Yeah,
I
would say first
parity. Parity. 135 years won't even be there. I think that it is useful to not just think of the future, but also think of the last 20 years. Now, true, progress has been slow, but there has been progress. I was looking earlier today at some of the data, and it is disappointing. I have it somewhere. The progress is not as much as we would have liked. But there is progress, and I'm not sure that this progress will accelerate. I think that we are now in a phase, and I think the waves, what happens in the US, often it takes a bit of time, but it also lands in Europe, And I think there is no question that there is a concerted attempt in the US to even reverse, because I don't know, I think they're looking at different statistics. It's as if women have taken over the world, which isn't true. But I think we are, at least rhetorically, I think there is a risk of a setback in the US in particular, which could then make its way to Europe. So it's very important, I think, at a time like this, to keep talking about it and to, remind everyone what the purpose of gender equality is. Christine Lagarde, it is great. I mean, she's very eloquent when she talks about this. We have a weird story about her today. But regardless of that, she is quite eloquent when she talks about it. So I think we have to at least ensure that we're continuing in the same direction, the direction of progress, and that we don't have a setback. And I think on that front, as always, you need the support of men.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, this is something that Ashley and I have both spoken about, me about to have a baby and Ashley having had her son. I mean, my husband was horrified when he really realized that 2 weeks paternity leave is only 2 weeks. And actually he started thinking about, oh, there are all these other things that I'd really like to be doing if I wasn't just at home for, say, 2 weeks. So yeah, it's definitely kind of like an issue, a subject for both men and for women. And
I don't know what other people's experiences are, but I think, paternity leave is a great idea. It really is. And I think it does make a difference. It's all quite new still, but I think over time it will make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. And really, before we kind of came in here, you mentioned that your son, you've been talking about schools. I believe you've got 2 children. Is that right? So what do you think has set you and your family life and just, I guess, mindset and strategies up for success so that you could continue to have a family, but then also continue to have a successful career?
Well, first of all, I never considered that there's a choice to be made. I wasn't brought up like this. I just, even though my mom didn't work, I always assumed that I'll work and I'll have a family, and I think you have to not even think about it. There's no choice. There's no reason. What you have to do is just try to ensure that family life is, I do have, I'm still married. I do have a supportive husband who was, willing to take some of the burden. Now, do my kids consider that, I've been a great mother? I think they're very proud of me. I mean, do they complain? Yeah, they complain all the time, but they're very proud of me. So I think, in your career, whenever they say, "Oh, Mom, you didn't show up for this or that," they will understand if you talk to them. The other thing is, I think that women's careers can develop slightly differently. I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking a step back when your kids are young. I myself went on 4 days a week at one point because my son wanted one thing, which is for me to pick him up from school 1 day a week. So I thought, how am I going to do that? These were the days when, we were in the office 5 days a week and it wasn't an option not to be in the office. Today, that's much easier because in hybrid working arrangements. But so I decided that I would go on 4 days a week. I would still work on Friday at home because, that's who that's who I am. But at least I did start picking him up from school. So I think you can take a step back. And, there are certain jobs, like I would say we have desk heads. So people who edit big sections of the FT. And I think if you want a woman to have that role, then maybe you have to just wait. And the woman doesn't have to be, maybe if it's a man, then he may do it in his 30. But it's a woman, she may do it in her 40s or in her 50s. And I think it's really important to be a bit more flexible in the way we think about careers. I don't think that there's enough of that happens in a workplace.
Yeah, that's definitely something that there's a whole topic on the future of work at LBS, and they've kind of touted that careers are going to be long and getting even longer as we live, as life expectancy increases. So it's kind of we're being encouraged to kind of think about how that career could manifest itself a bit differently. So I don't want to totally monopolize all the questions. I think it's probably about time to kind of open it up to the floor. So I think Deb here is going to be looking after some microphones. I think Ashley is going to help as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure, I can hear you clearly.
Yeah.
All the way to the top, right?
Roula, thanks again for coming to LBS this evening. I guess maybe it is a professional and personal question. Is there anyone, I guess, you've interviewed and sat down with many leaders, many notable people, I guess, over the last 2-3 decades? Is there any person that you've sort of met where the perception and reality, differ in terms of what their perception is to the outside world, and actually having sat down with them, done your diligence, looked at the facts, you've been very surprised with that difference? And then as a second question, and that's when you talk about mentorship and inspiration, are there any 2 or 3 people that you wish, I guess, even if it's throughout history, that you'd love to sit down and interview with the benefit of hindsight in a way? Thank you.
Yes. So on your first question, I think the former Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. I interviewed him. It was off the record, but I spent maybe a couple of hours with him just before he became president. The perception of him was this sort of young reformer who's going to change the country. He was being, invited to France. He'd studied in the UK. He was an eye doctor. So there was a whole sort of myth that was created around him. And I had a completely different impression. I had the impression that this was a show, and that he may very well be as thuggish as his father. And I would like to point out that I was proven right. But it was a lonely place to be when I would talk to people and tell them at the time. There are so many people throughout history that, where do I start? But I'll tell you about more recent, maybe just more recent history. I would have liked to spend time with Barack Obama, for example. He's always fascinated me. I would have liked to spend time with Nelson Mandela. But I can go on and on, but it's, you have to go with the people of your era and the ones who make themselves accessible.
Hi. this work? I'm curious about, well, one topic within AI that you kind of skirted on a little bit earlier. There's the whole theory of like AI basically killing the internet, where all the content is going to be, AI talking to AI, all generated artificially. Curious to hear your view, on this theory itself. Do you see kind of, well, humans having a role in like content creation in the future? And how do we make sure basically there is a space to do that?
So if I understand the question correctly, is do I see a role for humans in what?
Well, so there is kind of like I don't know, is this conspiracy theory or not? But the idea that most of the content on the internet today and in the future will be more and more just artificially generated.
So, right. So data generating data, essentially. I think that's one of the risks that even the technologists are concerned about. I mean, I think you need humans in the loop in everything that you do today with AI, and I suspect that there will remain, humans will remain in the loop. Now, the question I think is there could be certain circumstances, right, where AI is, an AI model is just training itself. But that is sort of the big danger that everyone needs to guard against, because this isn't just about an AI model generating data and training, say, another AI model. It's also about instructing another model to do, or an agent to do certain tasks. That's where it gets very scary. When it's almost like when AI just takes over from the human. I don't think anyone wants this, even though, in a theoretical sense, some people would try to see if you can do it, if you can reach it. But I don't think anyone actually wants this to happen, or to have any role in our society. So I would hope that that would be the moment when everyone steps back and thinks, what is it that we really need AI for? There's a need, and then there is what it's able to do, and that the focus is more on the needs.
Sorry, I just sometimes the idea of AI can get quite terrifying, can't it?
But we have to also think of all, the scientific discoveries that we'll be able to do, so it's not a one-way street.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel that there's probably balancing that kind of the scariness and then actually the optimism that's going to come out of it. Sorry, I think we have.
So, well, first, I'm already very impressed that you're a female editor of the Financial Times. And I'm even more impressed after you said you took the 4 days working and you're still the editor of the Financial Times. So my question is, what made you the editor of the Financial Times after even this kind of sacrifices you take? And in fact, what are the characteristics or lessons what did you fight for to become an editor of Financial Times? And are there lessons that you could share with us so we can also one day be in that leadership room, etc.? Yeah.
So I didn't plan it. I never planned to be editor. That was not, my life plan. My life plan was to be a journalist, but it wasn't to be editor. For some people do plan their careers that way, but it wasn't, in my plan. What happened is that I was a foreign editor, and which was a job I really, really wanted, and I had, and I had asked for. And then the editor at the time asked me to be his deputy editor, which I was reluctant to do at first, because that wasn't kind of, part of the plan. And I couldn't say no. This was sort of the number 2 position. And I was good at, from what he told me, at managing. So, when you're in a news organization, you're mostly focused on generating news or, editing news. And I was quite good at management, and that made a big difference. That's why he asked me to be deputy editor. And once I was deputy editor, then I was sort of in, one of, several people who were then considered for the editorship. And I was the only woman, and, my colleagues were incredibly qualified. And, then it's a race, and, your proprietor interviews and, asks you to give your vision and your plans. And I was picked. But it really was not my plan. So sometimes not everything is planned in life. Keep your options open.
Thank you so much for coming to LBS. I think you touched on a little bit on the questions I'm going to ask. I'm really curious to hear, can you share with us a mentor that impacted you a lot during your career journey? Especially you mentioned you didn't initially plan to be an editor, and you sort of work in a, not too female dominated industry. Can you share with us how a significant figure in your career journey impacted you?
Yeah. So I think I had two mentors who made a difference to my career. One was very early on, when I was in New York at Forbes. She was an older, far more experienced journalist, and I worked with her on deeper investigations and longer stories that would take months and months. And so I just learned and absorbed a lot in my early career. And I think that is, one of the things that is quite rare today, to be able, because we're all sort of leaner organizations, but to be able to spend, 2 years working with a senior reporter and learning is an incredibly valuable experience. And I think, in more recent years, the editor who asked me to be his deputy was somebody that I spoke to and listened to a lot, and who supported me a lot in my career at the FT.
I have the mic here, right? Thank you. Hi. So in your job, you see just so much of what's going on in the world. And we've talked a lot about wars, Trump, AI, gender inequality. On the other side, what should we be optimistic about?
You really got me there. I do think that there's a part of AI that you can be optimistic about. I don't know about you, but I just love, curiosity and discovery, and I do think that their AI is positive. I think the state of the world today certainly does not lend itself to optimism. So there, I'm afraid I cannot help you right away, except to say that, we are living a very significant moment in history, and I think there is that in itself, at least from my perspective, is a privilege. We really are, it is very, very rare to have so many massive events, one after the other. From the pandemic to a war in Europe, to sort of the Middle East in flames, to the Trump presidency, China. It is a very particular moment in history, and we are witnessing it. And I'm very lucky to be editing a newspaper that has to report on it. So maybe in coming from the Middle East, I learned one thing, which is, time is very, very important. And, it's the arc of history, and things that aren't working today, or even if you are at your most desperate moment today, history turns. We had a moment, I think we had a whole period since the fall of the Berlin Wall where, democracy was ascendant, and, we've made a turn, but it will come back. So just you have to be a bit more philosophical about life. That's my advice.
I think we've got time for maybe 2 more questions. So if we go here and then, sorry, you've had your hand up quite a while, the blue jumper.
Thanks. Thank you for coming to speak with us today. Actually, my question was not dissimilar. Building off of that, I have many friends who are increasingly coming off of the news because they find it hard to stay optimistic. So my question to you is, how do you personally find balance since you are so steeped in the news day in, day out? And then the second question is, do you feel there's any issue today that's underreported that has the potential to shape either global business or society in the next decade? If that's an easier question to answer.
So on your first question, I suggest you read the Weekend FT, because there is a lot in the Weekend FT that can, take you just to a different place, whether it is, fashion, or it's gardening, or it's food and drink. And what we do, and I often say this also, is we've got to give readers a break as well. And so I try to have something on the homepage every day that is either a lighter story or, and I often say, we have to look for positive stories as well. There are a lot of people who don't have an option of sort of turning away from the news. They have to read the news. They have to read the news for their jobs. They have to read the news for their business. They have to read the news for their schools. So, we have to also give them a little bit of, something that's a bit lighter. And I always talk about the importance of surprising readers. So a lot of that is produced also on the weekend, but we run it throughout the week. I think humor is extremely important as well. We're just not that funny at the FT. I have tried. I really have tried. But we've got a couple of funny columnists, but we're not very funny. We're just very serious. So I'll try to do better on that. What was your other question?
Any underreported issues today that you think have the potential to shape?
I mean, there are always underreported issues. The ones that tend to be underreported are the ones where the story that doesn't impact the wider world. But that's not to say that it shouldn't be reported. I mean, Sudan is underreported, for example, today. I think Gaza is reported, but given the scale, could be more reported. But there are always issues that are underreported, and you do have to prioritize. The one thing that I have not wanted to do is, when you move from a print, from a newspaper, where there's a limit to how many stories you have onto a website where it can be unlimited. You can very easily just write more and more and more and just churn stuff out. But it's a very important discipline to prioritize and to think on a daily basis what is important. So what I try to do, if there's a story that I think is really important but is underreported, then we may not report it in news terms, but we may do a much bigger take once in a while. And some of those stories, we do think about in that way.
And just a final question, sorry, because I know that there are so many people.
Thank you for this very human conversation. Another follow-up on the optimism question. You have mentioned clarity, and you have been praised for your courage, which appears to seem natural for you. So when dealing with difficult questions, sophisticated questions, how are you able to see through the fog and ask the right questions? See through the fog and ask the right questions?
I think that is, in a way, even more required today, because I think there is a lot of fog. I think you have to think of two things. One is we're in a daily, we're in the immediacy, right? We're in a daily business. So I think that you have to just step away a little bit from the immediacy and just kind of look at the big picture. And you have to look for patterns. So often, I will notice, because we did one story from this section on some day, and then a week later we did a story on another section, but I'm exposed to all of it. So I'll give you a very concrete example. Last year, AI adaptability was much slower than everyone expected. Now, in the last sort of 2 months, I just feel like it has accelerated. Like suddenly, this company's doing this other company's doing that. So it does take noticing patterns to be able to, but in order to notice pattern, you do need to step back from the sort of daily grind and to think a little bit about what is really happening. And then patterns then help you sort of zero in on what are the important trends that we should investigate? What are the important stories that we, may not have noticed? Sometimes I also find a nugget of information at the bottom of a story that actually just gives me, a great idea. And then I might ask, the reporters to start looking into it. So I need to be very immediate, but at the same time, it's part of my job to be able to also stand back. Weekends are very good for this. Saturday and Sunday mornings.
Amazing, thank you. Roula, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'll just welcome Nihar and Ashley back up, because so we've had the enormous pleasure of leading kind of like the Women in Business Club this year. And by the end of this year, we will have got to about 50 events that we will have held throughout the year, which is personal development, professional development, and Trailblazers, which we're part of tonight, has been a cornerstone event that actually Sam Yu, who was formerly president last year, resurrected, and is something that we wanted to continue because it's just so important for people to see incredible people like yourself at the pinnacle of their career. So thank you so much. What I would then say is that in natural fashion, leaders must move on, unless maybe you're Donald Trump, which hopefully he will. So can we welcome our new president's leadership team up to the stage to say a couple of words to close out before we move to kind of like some food and networking.
Well, thank you, Siobhan, Ashley, Nihar, for everything. I think we're super excited to be here. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks Rohan for joining this event. I think we have a very high bar to fill in this year. I don't know if everyone knows us, but we are Mariana Roca from Peru, Jenny Kuo from Taiwan and UK, and Abby Reed from UK. We were all part of the Junior Exco last year. So I think we have a very tight connection with the club, and we are very excited to take it to the next level next year, continue following the steps that the previous presidents had laid out for us. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, and then over the last few weeks, we've been working to finalize our senior exco team for next year. So we're super excited. We have about 20 incredible women kind of joining us on the mission to continue to like build this community. We hope we're able to kind of capture the wealth of different experiences and ideas that we have kind of the privilege to have at LBS across all our programs. And like with this team, our main focus is basically to embody and kind of build on the work of this year to represent kind of what WIB is all about. So that's kind of lifting each other up, opening doors, and just creating a space kind of for real change that hopefully can last kind of beyond our time here.
So to help us wrap up, we're just going to share a little bit about what we're going to focus on next year, which is three main things. First and foremost, I think Abby, Mariana, and I talked about this, and the most important thing for us is really building a tight community of WIB where everyone feels seen, feel heard, but also feel like they can get involved in any capacity they want. So hopefully we'll be rolling out a lot more kind of, in addition to our flagship events like this, we also a lot more smaller gatherings that people kind of drop in and then feel connected to the club. And then the second thing we also want to focus on is around development, and then doing that through partnerships. So personal and professional development. So Equal is very close to my heart, but in addition to Equal, we also want to do kind of events throughout the years. So whether it's through workshops or mentorship opportunities, or through kind of external partnerships with other schools, alumni, or other women's network. And I think finally, as Will mentioned, it's really important for both men and women to be a part of this journey. So allyship will also be a huge part of what we're hoping to do next year. So working with other clubs and also the LBS community, we want to make sure that this is a space where everyone can feel comfortable and included. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And Roula, thank you so much again. Just one more round of applause and big thank you to Roula Khalaf, who's joined us tonight.